This is Lead Time.
Welcome, Lead Time. Tim Allman here. Jack Calberg has a day off. Pray the joy of Jesus is with you as I get the privilege today to hang out and learn with a gentleman that I've admired from afar. Now get to learn with him. Pastor Thomas R. Marcis Jr. is in the house. He's a 1986 graduate of Concordia Seminary, originally from Cleveland, Ohio. He began his ministry in Zap, North Dakota, where he served for 3 years before coming to Zion in July of 1989. And you have been at Zion since 1980. And as chairman of the North Dakota District Board of Directors, director of the North Dakota District, you are engaged in your community there, brother. North Dakota District Rural Ministry Task Force. He also serves, this is where we'll probably start right up front. He also serves his community as a head coach for boys soccer at Legacy High School in Bismarck and as president of the North Dakota Soccer Association. His team is off and running 13-0. I get to coach high school football. At this date, we're 6-0. That's all good. Glory to God. It's fun to compete. And he's been nominated for the National High School Soccer Coach of the Year. What? He and his wife, Sarah, have 4 grown children, Rich, Katie, Becca, and David, and they have 6 grandchildren as well. Hey, Pastor Marcis, how you doing, brother? Thanks for being with us on Lead Time.
Well, that was an awful long thing that you read there. It just says I'm an old guy because been doing all these things. So,
well, you had me at coach. I think there's so much that can be added of value for those of us who coach, not just athletics, but receiving coaching and pastoral leadership coaching from others. So let's get into kind of at a higher level, your ministry story. How has your pastoral ministry perspective changed over the years? What's changed? What hasn't changed? And the importance of going to that first call wherever God calls you and its impact later in life. Just want to get into a little bit more of your ministry story there, Pastor Marcis.
Well, I grew up in the suburbs. My dad was a pastor in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. So that's where I grew up, went to school at all the Lutheran grade school and high school in the Cleveland area. So I was a suburbs kid. Getting out of seminary, I go to Zap, North Dakota. It's not the end of the world, but they tell you can see it from there. And I always thought I knew what was rural until I moved to Zap, North Dakota. And so it was a lot different culturally and everything. But what I learned most was that I had to be a part of the people. So I went out and cut cattle, rode horse, branded, flipped calves, went out in the combine, all those kind of things. And it really impacted my ministry because it gave me that rural context like Jesus uses all the time in his parables. And so when I moved to Bismarck, there's it's the city in North Dakota, but a lot of rural area there, and its impact on the 23rd Psalm, John 10. I mean, those are 2 of my favorites that I've used in ministry now continually because of my connectivity at starting in Zap, North Dakota.
That's so good. So what about doing ministry in rural America? Does the average, I'm a suburban pastor, right? Does the average suburban pastor just not get? Our contexts are different. Let's talk about the different contexts.
Well, I think part of the context is that getting out onto the farm and, like I said, riding horse with them, understanding that, like here in North Dakota, they didn't get electricity. Here's a story for you that I found amazing. I graduated in high school in 1975, so I'm an old guy. But when I was out there and we were talking about things, I went to one of our members' homes and they had this nice square garden in the front yard of their house. And I'm like, why is the garden in your front yard? Well, that's where our old house used to be. And I said, oh, okay. Well, when we moved into our new house, which was ranch style, in 1975, we got running water. And I'm thinking their son and I were the same age. So I would have been in high school when they got running water in the house, which just blew me away as the difference in culture between rural North Dakota and suburban Cleveland. And it really made me understand the closeness to the land that they had and how I needed to get that. That's why I was in the corral flipping calves and going out. So I could understand the difference between being in a factory or being in a city.
What's been the biggest impact and maybe struggle too of being in a congregation like you have there in Bismarck for that many years? Approaching 40 years, right? 35 years.
Well,
or so
it's 36
now,
right now, so it's getting there.
Right. Yeah, yeah. What's been the biggest kind of takeaway? How has it gone well, and how have you kind of evolved in your leadership being in a congregation that long?
Well, one of the things is that you get generational with families. So you had their wedding, you baptized their kids, you confirmed their kids. Now you're marrying, you're having the weddings for their children, and so it's a generational thing. And as you know, families generationally, there's things that you know that nobody else knows, and while that's a good thing, it's also a challenge because some people have left the congregation because I know too much. I've been there too long. I know their skeletons in a closet, so to speak. And I obviously I don't wear those on my sleeve. That's not the first thing I think of. But they know that I know, so therefore they feel more comfortable going somewhere else. But for the most part, knowing families over generations is really impactful because you know the history of where the family came from. You saw the kid in confirmation. He's now adult with kids in confirmation. And it's very interesting to be able to have those conversations with them because they'll, oh, yeah, I remember that now from confirmation as you're going over with their young ones.
Yeah, no, that's sweet. How I don't know the climate of the churches there in Bismarck. How many are there, and like how well are you guys working together? I'm hoping so, and those relationships over time. I'm sure you've served as a circuit visitor and things like that. Just talk about kind of the wider LCMS ecosystem there in Bismarck.
Well, well. First of all, you got to before you talk about Bismarck, there's 6 circuits in the entire state, and the population center is more towards the east than it is to the west. So, like half of the state is 2 circuits, and the other half is 4. So our circuit is pretty spread out. A lot of small congregations. There's 4 congregations in Bismarck and 1 in Mandan. So Mandan is just across the river. We work together. We have a Lutheran school here in Bismarck. It's in our building. We're the largest of the congregations in the area. And so the school is in our building, which, so we all work with that. I have an interesting, different kind of relationship since I'm actually in the building with the school and the kids and chapel and all that. But we do work together in that regards. And there's a pretty good collegiality, here in the Bismarck Mandan area. Obviously I've been here longer than the rest of them, but we work together. But our circuit goes all the way from Bismarck all the way to the Montana line, and so it's a large geographic area. But you know, in the west part of the states, no matter what state you're in, you're going to have a large geographic area.
Yeah, no, I love it. Hey, let's get into your soccer story. How has coaching high school boys soccer shaped your pastoral ministry? How is that an extension of your ministry? Yeah.
Well, it's kept me in touch with where the youth of our community is. It actually goes all the way back. I've been coaching the public schools now for 32 years, and it started with soccer wasn't a big sport here in North Dakota. And in middle school, all the coaches were parents. They didn't have teachers. I was a parent with a middle schooler at the time, but I was the only one that had played because I played at Concordia Ann Arbor. I played at Concordia Seminary. And so I was coaching my son and his friends, and I was seeing how connected it was making me to the school system. So as my children moved through the system, I just kept coaching because I actually knew the sport. And 32 years later, I'm still here doing it. But I did 19 years of middle school, both boys in the fall, girls in the spring. And then when they built a third high school here in town, that my middle school was now going to be the feeder to the new high school, they asked if I would consider doing it. And at first I'm like, no, I'm happy with middle school. My 4 kids actually said, no, you have to do this. This is something you need to do. So needless to say, I moved up to the high school. But I never realized what a great thing being the high school coach was until I got there. I have absolute free reign of a public high school of 1,300 kids. I know what's going on in all their lives. I walk the halls. I'm I did FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, for 10 years there. Got to know athletes outside of soccer. It's really interesting because youth from Zion also go to Legacy, obviously, and they're like walking the halls, and all these other kids are coming up and they're talking to me, and they all want to know, and they're like, "Well, that's my pastor." It's just interesting for them to see in that kind of context. So I like it because of my connectivity to the kids, but it also in the wider community. Bismarck has about 75,000. So, I mean, that's obviously much smaller than the Phoenix area. But, I can't go anywhere. It's like, did I have a wedding? Did I have a funeral? Did I coach their kid in soccer? You know, I'm talking, people are always talking to me, and I'm always having to figure out, rack my brain. Okay, Don, do I know you from church? Do I know you from soccer? How does that work?
That's so cool. What an awesome story. Why is we're very focused right now. A number of our podcasts, our ministry focus, it's heavy in terms of the next generation right now. And I believe there's revival. I believe Generation Z, most church generation, recent Barna study. And I believe that they need to see multi-generational, the older pouring into the younger. Why is caring for and pouring into the next generation so important to you, Pastor Marcis?
Well, it's a twofold thing. I think I learned from them and they learned from me. I love to listen to them, and in Generation Z wants to be listened to. You know, I think that what frustrates me a lot of times with, I'm a boomer. What frustrates me with people of my own generation, they'll say stuff like, "Well, they're not very committed. They don't work very hard." And my comment back is, "Have you actually talked to any of them? I mean, is this something you just heard, or have you talked to them?" And when you talk to them like they have a brain in their head, it's amazing what they'll say back to you. Like, they'll actually, like, they don't treat you like, you know, you're just that old generation, you don't know. But if you actually listen to them and care about that, it's amazing. I mean, there is so many amazing kids in this younger generation that we just need to work together, and we
Amen.
work together if we actually listen to each other.
So listening starts with asking really good questions. What are
Oh,
some of your favorite
absolutely.
questions? What are some of your favorite questions that allow Gen Z to open up?
Well, the first question I always ask is, so what's your favorite class at school? I mean, I know that's an old school, but because then that leads into,
Interesting.
so why is that your favorite, and what is it that interests you? And of course, some of the guys, you know, I can get into them by talking sports first. They're, you know, that, I mean, a preacher actually knows that much about sports. Yeah, it's a big deal in our house. My wife probably knows more sports than most guys I know, and or has forgotten more sports than most guys I know. You know, so we talk a lot of sports at home, so I'm able to talk that lingo with them. The funny thing for me is that because I'm around them like that, we'll be in the car and some song comes on, and my wife will look over at me. You've heard this before, haven't you? Oh yeah, in the locker room, I've heard this blaring really loud. And you know, accepting them for who they are is a big deal, and listening to what interests them. And because then they want to know, then they'll ask me questions. I mean, it's like, if because I'm asking them questions, they'll talk back to me. And I've done it long enough now. I've been at the high school now 13 years since it opened, and I've been able to have some weddings of kids that I had at there. Here's early on in the high school, one of the football players unfortunately committed suicide during the football season, and then they asked me if I would be available to kids that were struggling to deal with it. So because, you know, the community at the school knew me, and the kids would see me walk in the hallway, so I knew I wasn't like just some counselor coming in to help them out and then leaving, that I was around. So it was an interesting back and forth.
Yeah, no question. Well, you're a pastor, and you're respected in your community. I think uh, I think the view of pastor in Generation Z is different than maybe millennials. I think millennials and even Gen X, because that's kind of, I'm right on that kind of
Right.
border. I think there's a little bit more institutional suspicion, but I think now you have a generation that is less church generally, didn't grow up, and so they don't have the baggage, I guess. Oh, you get together and you talk about Jesus and you meet on Sundays. I get that, but outside of that, I think they don't really know a lot about what it means to be a pastor. So I'm curious, in a public school, how are you able to incorporate kind of your faith and ministry? Is there prayer? Is there some of those other things? And or as people kind of come up and you just get to kind of more informally disciple them, how's that look there?
Well, the first way I get to disciple them is they get to see me on the field, that they're not going to hear me say anything, do anything that you wouldn't hear me say or do if you were at Zion. Like it's the language that I use, the way that I deal with people is the same. And I think that for Gen Z and even millennials, you were kind of going that way direction is, are you real or is that just your job? Is that who you are? And so they know that um, if they ask me a religious question, I'll answer it. I mean, I'm not out proselytizing I'm proselytizing only in the sense that I'm living my life of faith. But they ask me, I mean, I had a gal who was waiting for her dad to pick her up uh, one time after practice. She didn't have a license yet. And so I was just waiting with her because you're not going to leave her at the field. And she said, "Hey, I got a theological question for you." And I said, "Okay. Well, you know that story about Jonah and the whale?" And I said, "Well, it's not the whale, it's a fish." He goes, "Well, isn't that just allegorical?" No, 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 no. It's an actual event. And so we talked about it. And then when her dad picked her up, I kind of leaned in and said, "Yeah, she had a theological question for me." He goes, "I'm sure she's got a whole bunch more she's going to want to ask you." So it was kind of my way of like, I do have permission to talk to her about this. So there's that. Now, the other thing you talked about, not institutional behavior. In some ways, Zion has become soccer central in Bismarck, like referee classes, coaching classes. They use our building for that. Even though my high school during the summer, if we have a parents meeting, we'll end up having at Zion. So all these people are getting in the building that wouldn't necessarily get in otherwise. I'm not saying they're joining Zion, but they have that connectivity to what's happening there. So everybody, parents, kids alike, they all know what I do. They know who I am. And it's for the most part very much respected. I've never been questioned on it.
So good. Why should pastors, because I think you've cracked a nut here, or the Holy Spirit has led you to crack a nut about community engagement around a passion. I wish more pastors looked at what the felt needs in the community are. For you, it's Gen Z, and it's pouring into the next gen and coaching soccer and helping them on the athletic field and helping them just generally in life. Team sports teach an awful lot. But what words of wisdom would you give to a pastor as they're trying to figure out, how do I engage in my community more consistently? Anything there, Pastor Marcis?
Well, I think that it's easy for us as pastors to get into this little bubble. Like, we go to the office, we go visit our shut-ins, we go to the hospital, we have our meetings, we go home. Next day we get up, we go back to the office, and we do that. And we're in this little bubble, and we're missing out. We talk about how we want to get engaged in the community, but we sometimes get so wrapped up in doing, quote unquote, the business of ministry that we forget that there's more out there. I mean, in a small community, going to coffee and just sitting, it may seem like you're wasting time, but you're sitting at coffee in the cafe with about 10 of the guys from town that are just shooting the breeze and talking about things. You become a part of what's happening there. Because when you come from Ohio, like I have, and you go into rural North Dakota, it's like, okay, so how long are you really going to be here? Do you really, are you going to connect to it? And I think that making yourself a part of the community, and it can be, JCs or Kiwanis. I mean, that wasn't necessarily for me, but there's other ways to connect. I know another pastor that drives bus for the school. Not here in Bismarck. It's one of our rural pastors, but it's meeting a met need for the community. They needed bus drivers. He could, he had his license, he could do it, but it's a connection. And I think that the bubble for us as the church makes it hard for us to actually be the church, because we're not touching the lives of those around us. We're so in this little bubble that we forget all those outside the church that we're supposed to be sharing the good news to.
How has your work in the community changed the way your congregation not just views you, but views their kind of life out in the community? Have you any stories there about the impact that it's had on Zion as a whole?
Well, actually, yes. So our church building is actually 4 blocks away from Bismarck High School, the first high school here in town. So our church is like, quote unquote, downtown. Realize it's, not Phoenix, but downtown. And so we're 4 blocks away from the high school. And we were talking about how can we connect with them. And we met with some of the leadership of the high school there, and actually worked with Bismarck Baptist. It's this huge congregation. They're not close. And we worked with them to be able to do a mentorship program with at-risk kids at Bismarck High School. And so kids that considered at risk for being homeless or other areas. I mean, we have our population here. We have some Native American population at risk and so forth. And so we would connect up one of our members or one of the Baptist, Century Baptists, and then we'd get together once a month and have an event. Like we went with the kids, because these are kids that would never get to go to a football game. So got tickets for them to go to the high school football game, or took them to for horseback riding, or we went to a event at the local shelter for animals and so forth. And then the mentor and the mentee would be encouraged to have a visit, like have some kind of connection between the monthly events. And so here we were connecting to the local high school and these at-risk kids, and working with another church in town. Most of these kids had never been in a church building before, but we're only 4 blocks away from the school, so they were able to walk over. We'd have some food, and we'd go through the event, and we'd go, and it was a connection. Unfortunately, we only were able to do it for like 3 or 4 years, and then of course, how those things it varies and moves. But it was a way for the congregation really bought into it, and it was really already a part of our DNA here. I mean, I was involved with that. One of the things I didn't mention is I had an associate pastor that we were in ministry together for 14 years. And the 14 years he was here, he was an assistant high school wrestling coach at Bismarck High, which is just down the street. So it's like, in a way, in town, we were known as a church in town whose pastors were coaches. I did soccer and he did wrestling. So it's become, after all these years I've been here, it's kind of like expected by the congregation. It's not unusual. Oh, pastor's at a soccer practice, so he's going to be late to the meeting. I mean, nobody questions it. I come in a few minutes late. I'm not in shirt and tie. I got my baseball hat on, and I come in and, get into the meeting. Nobody questions it. It's like, oh yeah, pastor just coming in for practice. It's, and
so good.
That's kind of amazing, because, some churches, nope, you got to be here right on time. You got to,
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Well, wow, you've shaped that culture. The church exists for the community, and therefore pastors exist for the community. And you're called to equip the saints for love and good deeds. And part of your equipping is modeling what it looks like to serve, not just your congregation, but out in the community. Praise be to God. Hey, if you're listening right now and you're on YouTube, or you're on iTunes or Spotify, get over to YouTube. That's where the conversation is happening on this. And I'd love to hear stories. Let's hunt the good stuff. Stories of pastors and church leaders who are engaging out in their community. I'd love to hear and read a number of those stories. I'll be commenting on them on YouTube. So many times the algorithm on our YouTube podcast get spiked because people are saying disagreeable stuff with whoever the guest may be. Let's have an agreeable conversation. This is an area where we can unite, I would say, across whatever spectrum you think you're on in the LCMS. We exist to bring love and light out into our community, and leaders go first. Pastors go first in terms of trying to meet felt needs in our community. And that's exactly what Coach Marcis is doing. So good. All right, let's pivot a little bit, Coach, and talk about your role as a Synodical Reconciler. Some people may not even be aware what a Synodical Reconciler is. Let's talk about what it is and then why it's so important in the LCMS, especially in these days.
Well, a reconciler has a couple of different roles related to it, but because we live in a sin-sick world, there's conflict between pastor and pastors. There's conflict between pastor and congregations. There's conflict between congregations. There's conflict between the Christian day school leadership and the church leadership. I mean, there's just conflict all over the place. So as Christians, we shouldn't expect that we are not going to have conflict because we're Christians. We should expect that there's going to be conflict. So the question is, how can I honor God in this conflict? Reconcilers, if for a synodical, is a way for us to do that in a more biblical manner. Back in the way as a church we used to do it back before 1994 at the convention in 1994 is when things switched. We were more of a legalistic. It was almost like if there was a conflict, each side would lawyer up. And of course, when you lawyer up, you don't talk to each other. And so no reconciliation was possible. And there's no winners or losers. There was just losers because it was doing that. And actually, that's how I got involved with, ultimately became a reconciler. Zion, previous to my being here at Zion, the pastor had been let go, and it went through that whole system, and it was we lost over 300 people related to it, and it was a real conflict. And so at the 1994 convention, Synod decided to move away from this more legalistic court kind of proceedings, and there's more complicated than that, to this more reconciling. And if you go back to the 94, it would always mention two cases. There was a case going on at one of our seminaries, and then also Zion Bismarck. So we were like in the middle of it. So at 94, that was changed, and we went to this reconciler. Coming out of that, that's where I got, because I had been involved with that, that's where I got my opportunity to be on the board for human care. I mean, you mentioned that earlier, and I was chairman for that for a while. And when I got off of the board for human care after 9 years, that's when I was approached, would you be a reconciler? Because I'd done one thing to the other because of the situation we've been here. I've been privileged to go through the training. It's a week. Well, when I did it, it was like a 4-day training. I know that they're changing some of the training around. I've been through it 3 times. It's very interesting. During my ministry here, I've had 8 vicars, and every one of the vicars, I say the first thing you do when you get out, don't pass go, don't collect $200. Take the reconciler training. It's something that'll be valuable for you in your ministry. I don't know if they all listened to me on that, but that was always because, how do you interact with people? And, for me personally, as an example, one of the things you talk about is the 7 A's of confession. I'm not going to list them all, but the 7 A's of confession. And one of those is be very specific. And then the other thing is, don't use the words if, but, or maybe. And I always have in the back of my head, if I'm going to confess, and like I messed up, I screwed up, I make sure that I don't use if, but, or maybe. And then it's impacted how I teach the Lord's Prayer and Office of the Keys and Confession to my confirmation students, because I pull in a lot of the reconcilers things so that, don't use these words, and you got to be very specific and take responsibility for that. So it's actually impacted, being a reconciler has impacted my ministry and how I teach confirmation.
So good. Would you go into a little bit more depth about, because I think all of life is confession, absolution. I've said that before. It's not a matter of if a conflict's going to come, but when and in what form. And I can't control other people. I can only manage the way I present myself by the Spirit's power as a peaceful presence in the midst of inevitable chaos. Change management obviously requires you to enter into a number of hard situations. People don't generally like change, and any kind of growing congregation, you're always kind of in a change management season, and disappointing people in a way they can handle as your disruption comes. Hopefully not in a sinful way, but just in a change management type of way. We're actually exploring changing service times. That's not a small thing to consider, so that we can reach more people with the gospel. And so some people will be a little hurt by that. And so how do we sit with them in the midst of their discomfort and things like that? Could you go deeper in terms of some of the, I guess, tips and tactics that you learn as a synod reconciler that helps pastors and leaders engage in healthy conflict rather than dysfunctional conflict?
Well, some of them it is as simple as acronyms. I mentioned the 7 A's of confession. I think that, we talk about confession, we go to the catechism, and all of that is great. I mean, Luther does a great job of talking about the office of the keys and so forth. But how do we remember different things for life? So the first thing that we learn is about the 4 G's. And the 4 G's, the first one is, how can I glorify God in this conflict? And so, not that we should say, well, why am I in conflict? I'm a Christian. I shouldn't. No, there's going to be conflict. We live in a sin-sick world. We shouldn't be surprised at this conflict, because after all, where does Satan work the hardest? He doesn't work down the street at the local tavern. He works the hardest in the church. So we shouldn't be surprised by that. So when we have conflict, whether it be in our home, at the church, wherever we're at, how can I glorify God in this conflict? That's got to be the first question. And then the second question is also to it, and this is like, well, obviously, get the log out of my own eye, So instead of immediately pointing the finger, what did I do to create this conflict? And I think for us as pastors, that is so critical because it's easy to say, well, I presented the right thing and I don't know why this is such a problem. Why, so did I not talk to somebody that I should have before we presented it? I mean, and this is where I sometimes fall down. It's like it's um you make a change in whether it be your youth or your music or whatever, and you get all excited, you're doing it. Well, did you talk to the last person that was doing it? Did you talk to that? And so part of that second one is get the log out of your own eye. If I messed up, I got to own it. And I think as pastors, it's easy for us to sometimes get into we explain it away. And, I really meant to say something to you. That kind of thing. No, I messed up. I should have come to you. That's on me. You have a right to be upset about this. I messed up. And I can tell you, I was just talking to somebody Sunday in between services, and that's the exact thing I said to them. That's on me. I messed up. I should have talked to you first. They weren't over the top upset, but they had a reason to be. I should have said something to them before we did something. Nothing major,
Right.
but nevertheless, if we're not willing to apologize and admit when we've done wrong in the small things as pastors, are we going to be able to do it in the big things? I mean, I think that sometimes, we see ourselves as leaders, and of course, a leader's always got to be right, which of course that's not true. But I mean, as a leader, I got to be right, and I got to be leading, and no. Sometimes we need to be vulnerable and say, you know what, that's on me. I messed up, and I think that it's helped me as senior pastor with associate pastors and other staff because and this is something, Tim, you totally meant. They don't teach us how to be administrative pastors and senior pastors at the seminary. We're taught to be lone rangers. And so when we're all of a sudden dealing with people, how do we act as the senior administrative pastor in such a manner that we're leading, but we're not being dictatorial? And confession, absolution, this, getting the log out of your own eye becomes very, very important. I mean, as I've dealt with my associates, I found that it's very important for me to admit to be vulnerable and not always be the guy in charge. And hey, you were right. I shouldn't have done that. But on the other hand, if they mess up, it's on my desk and I have to own it too. But I mean, if I make the mistake, I really have to own it. But if they mess up, you're administrative, it ends up on your desk, right? You got to own it.
For sure.
Um,
For sure.
and then the go and be reconciled, and I'm trying to think how the wording goes. The first one is go, and the third G, I can't remember. It's go, but it's go so that help them understand that they've done you wrong or where they're wrong. And then the third G is to be reconciled with them. The third one is that so that we can be reconciled. The fourth one is so we can be reconciled with each other. And if you go to Ambassadors of Reconciliation, they have some great resources to that. The 4 Gs is right there, the 7 As of confession. And have you seen the where they have, it's called the half moon. I'm drawing a blank at the moment there.
It's all right.
But all the different parts of reconciliation, like one side is murder, one side, the far side, it's the slippery slope. Have you ever slippery slope?
But yeah. But if you can talk about it a little bit.
Yeah,
That's great.
sure. The slippery slope. So if you're on a hill, you're always in the middle is where you want to be because you're not sliding off. And when we're dealing with conflict, we're sliding over. And here an example would be that when we're talking about if we're avoiding or overlooking. Those are very similar. Now, if we overlook a problem, then I'm saying this problem is not going to be an issue. And that means I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to make it into a bigger thing. But if I ignore that there's a problem, now we're building up this kitchen sink, so to speak, that down the road I'm going to throw it at you. So while they're very similar, overlook is a very conscious decision. You're kind of leaning over to the one side where you might slip off the edge, but it's very important to realize that it's still a matter of reconciliation if I'm overlooking. If I choose to overlook, then I need to really overlook, not ignore the problem. There's much more to it than that. I mean, that's an example of it.
It's so good. Well, It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when conflict comes. And I have the tendency to engage with it. I have a higher tolerance for risk, and therefore change is not as threatening to me. I have to recognize that not everybody on our team shares that same desire. But one of my leadership, I guess, staples is I will, in groups, not naming a person, but I will name a problem um, in a large group. And it's kind of shocking, I think, sometimes for people to say, he's talking about this right now. There's only been small little groups of people talking about this. And one could be um, we did a organizational change. We narrowed down our staff, our kind of executive team. Give some scope, about $8-9 million budget, and church and school kind of engaged in that, right? And the school is now not the executive. The principal is not on that executive team, because that
Okay.
executive team is largely focused on growing church and reaching, the 85% of people who won't send their kids to our school for one reason or another. And so you could understand the optics would be, maybe there's church and school division and things like that. So like heading into that conversation consistently is something we're very eager to do, because people are talking. And so, yeah, I care for our school. I'm in these meetings. We want the right people to be in the right room to make the right decisions. And that's part of the reason why this organizational change, I can't say that actually enough. And I'm still the ultimate champion for our school. That's just one little change management thing that we're
Sure.
kind of walking through right now. As early as yesterday, I was in a all staff meeting, including the administrative team for our school, just talking through some of those dynamics. And to get you behind the scenes a little bit more with us, because of the video that came out 6 months ago with my apology and not talking about leadership formation and things like that, there were rumors that, Christ Greenfield's creating a strategy to leave the LCMS. And so what does that mean for us? Those are all very, very, very false rumors. And so I can't say that enough to our team, because
Right.
people don't like even the thought of that, nor do I want to be a part of anything like that. So yeah, those were two of the difficult conversations that, with about 25 staff yesterday, I just kind of spoke about pretty openly. Do you kind of have a similar approach when certain things come? Do you like to head it up? I mean, if it's between a person, right, I
need to
go
go to them
directly to that person, right? But if it's a more cultural thing where a number of people have been talking, I've found that trust grows as we just wade right into it. And is it
Well,
awkward? Is it
and
uncomfortable? For
honesty is
sure.
always a big part of it. I
Isn't that
mean,
right?
and that goes back to that second G, like, what did I go into it? So sometimes when one of the reasons I love to talk about things is because obviously something I thought was obvious wasn't obvious. And so I didn't explain it as well as I should have, or I didn't listen as well as I should have. And so, when you bring things out front, what you're talking about there is really a good case of active listening. It's because you can say the right thing and tell somebody, but if they don't hear it, you haven't made any progress. And so I think that it's important to actively listening. This is what I heard you say. Is this what you mean? To be able to clarify. And because if we can clarify and clear that, then a lot of conflict can be overcome, because conflict a lot of times is just misunderstanding. Well, I thought you meant this when you really said that. And in confirmation class, this is just the way I always say it in confirmation class when I'm trying to explain it to my confirmands. I always say, did you know that every service I preach 3 sermons? And they're like, Pastor, there's only one. What are you talking about? Well, there's a sermon I intend to preach, the sermon I actually preach, and the sermon you heard me preach. And they're not necessarily the same. And conflict revolves around those 3 things a lot of times. I think I'm saying something clear and I'm not, or I did say it clear and you just didn't hear it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the differentiation. I love that. There are always 3 sermons. That's just sociologically true. Anytime we're in a communication task, the differentiation between intent and impact, that's from a book called Difficult Conversations, Intent and Impact. And my intention could be this, but other people don't know what my intention is. My intention may be pure as the day is long, or it could be a little shady.
Sure.
And confession is going to be needed to talk about. And even if my intent was as pure, Holy Spirit filled, genuine, authentic, but the impact to you as you heard it or experienced whatever that change was negative, I still have to own the impact to my brother or sister. I don't get to make excuses. That's why your no ifs, ands, or buts or maybes is so important. I don't get to
Absolutely.
decide how that person was impacted. That's between them and God, and them and me. And so the first of the cross wins. There's always an opportunity for confession. And again, the more we confess, the more trust is built, especially for senior leaders. We have to go first in terms of owning intent and impact. Anything more there, Tom?
Well, and I think that as a senior leader, you help to set the tone. I often say, Zion was here before I got here. Zion will be here long after I'm gone. But after 36 years, the reality is that Zion has taken on portions of my personality. I mean, and our leadership in how we do things. And part of my preparation for them to understand is that the next senior leader will undoubtedly not have the same personality that I have, nor should he. And so that they're going to have to, you talked about that earlier, pivot to the new, to the change in that personality. Now, I didn't go about like making Zion to have my personality, but if you're a pastor there for
It is what it
36
is.
years, it's just kind of a natural thing eventually that they do.
How are you preparing for transition? How many more are you talking openly about it, or where are you at as a congregation kind of planning on that next season?
Well, we're openly talking about it in the sense that, we're working with Pastor Mark Zender, Always Forward, and talking about transition and, looking at who we are, who Zion is as a congregation, and what that means to prepare, hopefully overlap, and then, pass the baton, so to speak, after I've been here this long, so that they know that there is this agreement. This is the next guy who's God has sent to lead you, and he is here for you. In other words, I don't want the congregation looking to me like, well, what does Pastor Marcis think, or well, that Pastor Marcis never did that. Well, no, the next pastor that comes in as senior needs to have the same love, care, and concern that you've given me, and give that to him. And Always Forward is really, I mean, he's done a great job helping us. I mean, we're still a year and a half away or so from retirement, but we're in that process working towards figuring all that out to help Zion make the transition, because we got a lot of great things happening here in ministry. And it shouldn't go down just because I leave. I mean, the ministry isn't me. I get to be a part of the ministry. I get to be in the leadership position with the liturgy, but the ministry, but I'm not the ministry. Zion has some awesome opportunities here, and you don't want that to backtrack just because one of the pastors is gone.
Amen. Hey, let's final question here. We talk on Lead Time about we're praying for healthy systems and structures and culture in the LCMS, praying for that and trying to model the change we'd like to see on these conversations. What are the strengths for us in the LCMS, and where do you view? You've got a longer range view than even I do. What are the strengths, and where do we need to grow in the LCMS?
Well, I think one of the strengths that we've always had in the Missouri Synod is our school system. And I'm troubled by some of what I see going on in our my second, our colleges and so forth, and some of the closures. But the reason I say that's a strength is that a lot of the leaders in Synod that I know well, I went to college with them. I might have played soccer with them. They did intramurals with them. We go to seminary, and that we actually know each other, even if I was looking for some information on some things about 2 years ago on some, and I called some pastors that were in different roles in Synod. I hadn't seen them in 30 years, but because of the relationship that we had back in college, and even some back to high school, because I went to Lutheran West in Cleveland, some of those all the way back to that we had this bond, this connection. Missouri Synod, over against a lot of the other church bodies, we've had that. I think we're losing a little bit of that right now, but hopefully that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. But I think that's always been one of our strengths related to that. I'd like to see us get back to being able to make sure that we're not making practice into doctrine, because I think that can be a problem sometimes. I mean, things things that I like that you don't, you might do something different. I think we sometimes confuse different practices between us as a doctrinal issue when it's not. I mean, law and gospel, man, law and gospel is such a strength for us as a church body, and, holding on to the Lutheran confessions and getting into scripture. But I think that sometimes we're adding to that sometimes can cause a problem. So getting back to what the basics are and being the church, I guess that would be where I would see things at.
Amen. Have you been to many synodical conventions, Pastor
I've
Marcis?
been,
Yeah.
yes, actually, I've only been a voting delegate twice, but with my different roles, with the Board for Human Care, when I was on the board when I was on the district's board here, I would represent the district. So I've been to a lot of different synodical conventions, and they ebb and flow. I was actually, the first convention I was ever a delegate at was a district convention. I was 19 years old. Don't ask me how I got elected to do it. The voting delegate from our congregation, and boy, was that a eye opener, because that was right during the whole Seminex seminary thing. It was very interesting and very eye opening. So I've been there for some of those interesting things. But I think that as a church body, we have a lot of pluses. We need to go to those, and I think we're more alike than we are different. Sometimes I think we focus in on our differences with each other instead of how we are together in doctrine, like I said, with law and gospel and so forth.
Amen. Amen. So good. We're gearing up for the next round of conversations for the Synod Convention, and I'm right there with you, praying for charity in all things, kindness. We can differ around a lot of adiaphora topics, like pastoral formation, how we do it,
Yes.
and like how prior approval gets kind of figured out. There needs to be vetting, but there needs to be more transparency. That's kind of generally what I and others would like to see. And
Everything
there are
you
other.
said there,
I
I
think there
agree.
needs to be more voices for commissioned ministers, trying to figure that out. That's been a thing for quite a while. And so, yeah, there are those topics, and the CUS system and how they connect to our universities. That's definitely going to be a topic. And I hope we can engage in these conversations in front of mics and behind mics with a desire to work from our strengths, work from a place of unity, try to listen twice as much as we speak, to hear our brother or sister's point of view, and to recognize that they're not the enemy. And if I try to make that person or that group into the enemy, I'm playing right into the enemy's hands. That's Satan, who seeks to steal, kill, and destroy. So any final comments, Pastor Marcis? This has been a lot of fun, brother.
Well, I think that I would just encourage pastors to always be looking into their community and see how they can, what gifts they have. I mean, was fortunate enough to play soccer, and that's where I got it. But there's so many ways we can impact the community that we serve, so that they see the church as more than that building that's down the street, that they see us as a part of the community. And I think pastors being out and about is really critical for us to be able to do ministry. So I would encourage
Amen.
you, where is your niche? What do you have? And just to find that and live it out.
Amen. Well, you've modeled that. This is Lead Time. Please comment, go over to YouTube, be a part of that conversation, like, subscribe, comment, wherever it is you take in these conversations. It will promise to continue to have wonderful, wonderful leaders within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod generally, who are talking about a number of different things that we think will, by the Spirit's power, advance the cause of Christ. The days are too short to do anything else. And again, to double down on what Pastor Marcis says, if you are a pastor, if you're a part of a local church, you don't just exist for yourself. You exist for the advancement of the gospel of Jesus Christ, meeting felt needs, developing relationships, and praying for an opportunity to share the hope that you have, which is Jesus Christ as King and Lord. It's a good day. Go make it a great day. Thanks so much, Pastor.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Lead Time, a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective. The ULC's mission is to collaborate with the local church to discover, develop, and deploy leaders through biblical Lutheran doctrine and innovative methods. To partner with us in this gospel message, subscribe to our channel, then go to theuniteleadership.org to create your free login for exclusive material and resources, and then to explore ways in which you can sponsor an episode. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode.